The text arrived an hour ago, a cheerful chime slicing through the quiet afternoon. I borrowed your old ring for the party, Grandma. Hope you don't mind. I smiled as I typed back, Have fun, dear. But the genuine smile didn't reach my eyes. It was a ghost of an expression. Moments later, my finger was punching in Frank's number. Register the theft of inventory item 847, I told my lawyer, my voice clear as a bell. A $3 million pink diamond ring. Now the police were swarming that elegant gala, the one where Cynthia, my daughter-in-law, was undoubtedly flaunting what she believed was a worthless trinket. If you're watching, subscribe and tell me where you're from, because this story, I promise, will leave you breathless. My name is Grace. I am 71 years young, and for the last decade, I've been the invisible mother-in-law, a shadow lingering at family gatherings, an old woman simply in the way. To Cynthia, I was nothing more than an annoying fixture in the sprawling house my late husband Mark had left me. She'd sashayed into our lives 10 years ago, marrying my son, Liam. From that very first day, she began treating me like an intruder in my own home. Cynthia, one of those women convinced the world owes them grandeur, moved with the polished grace of a well-funded predator. Always draped in the finest red silks or emerald velvets, always adorned with the expensive trinkets Liam bought to appease her endless desires. The moment her designer heels clicked across my threshold, I became her personal maid. Grace, make me coffee. Grace, iron my black dress for tonight. Grace, don't make noise when you walk. I have a headache. She never spoke to me with an ounce of respect. To her, I was merely the old woman, as if my name had been erased with the passage of time. At family dinners, her words would float across the table, discussing me as if I were a distant, senile relative. Liam, your mother should consider a nursing home. This house is far too large for someone her age. My own son, Liam, would simply lower his head, a defeated murmur escaping his lips. Mom is fine here, Cynthia. But I saw the shift in his gaze, the quiet worry, the subtle way he began to view me as a burden. Cynthia, like an insidious whisper, had poisoned his mind, brick by painstaking brick, convincing him that I was too frail to manage such a large home, that they needed the space for their grand plans. Her dreams were vast. My living room transforming into her opulent office, the garden Mark and I had nurtured for 40 years ripped out, replaced by a soulless modern entertainment area. For years I swallowed the bitter pill of her humiliations in silence. When guests arrived, Cynthia would introduce me as Liam's mother, never as the owner, never the matriarch of this sprawling estate. When she hosted her lavish parties, I was exiled to my room. For, as she so delicately put it, old people make others uncomfortable. There were nights I cried soundlessly into my pillow, a silent question echoing in the dark. How had I become invisible in the very home I'd built with such love? What Cynthia never knew, what no one in my family knew, was that Mark had left me so much more than this house. In his final years, he had quietly amassed a staggering collection of art, rare jewelry, and invaluable antiques. He knew my discreet nature, my aversion to flaunting wealth, and he trusted me implicitly to safeguard his legacy. Tucked away in a secret safe, cunningly concealed behind a painting in my room, lay a collection valued at over $15 million. Among those treasures was the very ring Cynthia had just borrowed. An exquisite piece, a 5-carat pink diamond, its facets catching the light, designed by a master French jeweller in 1920, valued at an astonishing $3 million. To the untrained eye, it was merely an elegant antique. To an expert, it was a masterpiece. Today, Cynthia was attending a charity gala, one of those glittering events where the wives of businessmen paraded their wealth, each vying for the most impressive jewels. For weeks I'd endured her complaints about not having the perfect accessory for her gold dress, her frustrated sighs as she thumbed through catalogues, lamenting the prohibitive cost of pieces that even Liam's generous budget couldn't cover. This morning, as I tended to the hydrangeas in the garden, I saw her slip into my bedroom, uninvited. It wasn't the first time she had rummaged through my things, but this time felt different. I watched, unseen, as she opened my small wooden jewelry box, the one where I kept my everyday pieces, and her eyes, glittering with avarice, fell on the pink diamond ring. She picked it up, turned it over in the sunlight, and I saw that familiar dismissive curve of her lips, the smile of someone who believes they have found something insignificant, yet useful. An hour later, her text arrived. "I borrowed your old ring for the party, Grandma. Hope you don't mind." She hadn't even bothered to ask, simply took it, fully convinced that everything I owned was hers for the taking, that I was too old, too irrelevant to possess anything of true value. When I read that message, something inside me, long dormant, finally snapped. For 10 years I had endured her snubs, her open contempt, her cruel remarks about my age and my supposed uselessness. But to take my ring, a piece representing one of Mark's most cherished secrets, that was the ultimate insult, the final straw. I sat in my garden chair, the phone heavy in my hand, and a genuine smile, sharp and cold, finally bloomed on my face. "Have fun, dear," I texted back, the words a silent promise. Then, without a moment's hesitation, I dialed Frank, Mark's best friend, the only soul who knew the full truth of our hidden fortune. "Frank," I said, my voice steadier than it had been in years. "It's time. Activate the protocol you and Mark designed. Cynthia just stole inventory item 847. There was a beat of silence on the other end, then Frank's low chuckle. "Grace, are you absolutely sure you want to do this? Once we set this in motion, there's truly no going back," I confirmed. After a decade of silent humiliation, it was time for my daughter-in-law to learn precisely whom she was dealing with. Frank quickly explained the plan. For years, he had meticulously documented every piece in Mark's collection, officially registering them as high-value items with discrete inventory numbers. Each had its own certificate of authenticity, updated appraisals, and, critically, full insurance coverage. The ring Cynthia had taken was legally documented as item 847, valued at $3 million. "I'm calling the insurance company immediately," Frank stated. "The protocol dictates that when a registered item is taken without the owner's explicit authorization, we must report it as theft. In 30 minutes, the police will have a warrant to recover stolen property, no matter where it is." While Frank made his calls, I sat in the hushed elegance of my living room, the memories of Cynthia's slights swirling around me like dust motes in the sunlight. The time she made me eat in the kitchen during Liam's business dinner, claiming there wasn't enough room. The previous Christmas, when she'd ripped open expensive gifts from Liam, then handed me a cheap scarf with the condescending remark, "We got something simple for you, Grace, because at your age, you don't need much." I remembered the day her book club met, how she'd interrupted me reading in my favourite armchair, declaring, "Grace, could you go to your room? We need privacy for important discussions." Her friends had looked at me with pity, as if I were an old dog to be shooed away. But what truly twisted the knife was the conversation I'd overheard just last week. Cynthia, on the phone with her sister Brenda, her voice acid. "I swear this old woman is driving me crazy. She lives in this huge house like a queen, but look at how she dresses, her cheap jewellery. It's pathetic. Liam and I are just waiting for her to move into a nursing home, but she's too stubborn. Once she's finally gone, I'm renovating this whole house, starting with throwing out all her ugly antiques." That conversation, those venomous words, became the catalyst. Cynthia didn't just despise me, she despised everything Mark and I had built together. She had no idea that those ugly antiques she abhorred were worth more than she could ever earn in several lifetimes. Soon Frank's call pulled me from my reverie. "Everything is set, Grace. The theft report has been officially filed. The ring is listed as stolen property, valued at $3 million. I gave the police the address of the hotel where the charity gala is being held. They have orders to recover the stolen property immediately. And what will happen to Cynthia? I asked, a tremor in my voice I hadn't expected. Frank sighed. Grace, technically, she has committed grand theft. We're talking about $3 million. Under the law, she could face several years in prison. But you're the victim. You can decide if you want to press criminal charges or simply reclaim your property. I told him I needed to think about it. For now, I just wanted to see the look on Cynthia's face when she realized she had irrevocably underestimated the useless old woman she so despised. An hour after filing the report, my phone rang again. It was Liam, his voice raw with panic. Mom, what's going on? The police just stormed Cynthia's party. They're saying she stole a $3 million ring. This has to be a terrible mistake. It's not a mistake, son, I replied, my voice steady, almost serene. Your wife took a very valuable piece from your father's collection without permission. That ring is worth exactly $3 million, and she had no right to take it. What collection? What are you talking about? Dad never owned anything worth $3 million. Mom, you have to call the police and tell them it was a misunderstanding. It was unbelievable. My own son, completely unaware of the fortune his father had painstakingly built. Mark had been meticulous in concealing his investments and collections, even from Liam. He had wanted to shield us from the perils that visible wealth attracts. Kidnappers, scammers, distant relatives emerging from the woodwork with outstretched hands. Liam, I said, my voice carrying the weight of untold secrets. There's a great deal you don't know about your father and me. Your wife just made a very serious mistake, and she's going to face the consequences alone. Mum, have you lost your mind? Liam's voice, usually so steady, cracked with a desperate edge. Cynthia is crying. They're treating her like a criminal. Her friends are recording everything on their phones. Her reputation is ruined. He repeated it, as if the words themselves might conjure the impossible. Her reputation. The line went quiet, but the echo of his plea hung heavy in the air. And what about the 10 years I've spent putting up with her, Liam? Treating me like trash in my own home? The humiliations in front of people? My voice, usually soft, was a steel wire pulled taut. What about that conversation where she told her sister I was pathetic? A beat of charged silence. He knew exactly which conversation because he'd heard it too and had done nothing. Mom, please, he finally mumbled, the fight draining from him. Cynthia can be difficult, but she doesn't deserve jail over a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Liam. The words were a cold, hard stone dropping into a well. It was theft. And now, your wife is going to learn that the woman she despised so much isn't the helpless old woman she thought she was. I hung up, the abrupt click reverberating in the sudden silence of my living room. 10 years. 10 years my own son had watched his wife's slow, deliberate cruelty and had never once raised his voice to defend me. Now, with the consequences arriving like a tidal wave, he expected me to be Cynthia's shield. But the invisible woman, the one who bore everything in silence, was gone. 20 minutes later, the chime of the doorbell announced Frank, ushering in Peter, a man in his 50s with the quiet intensity of a seasoned hunter. Peter was sharp, his eyes missing nothing, his specialty cases of fraud and art theft. Grace, Frank began, his gaze steady. Peter has been discreetly investigating Cynthia for the last 6 months, ever since you mentioned your suspicions about her activities. Shock stole my breath. Suspicions? I never said I suspected Cynthia. Frank offered a slight, knowing smile. Remember the conversation in December? You mentioned some smaller pieces had moved, your jewelry box disturbed more than once? A flicker of memory. Yes. I'd dismissed it then, blaming old age a wavering mind. I thought it was my imagination, old age making me forgetful. It wasn't forgetfulness, Grace. Frank's voice softened, but his jaw was set. I decided to investigate quietly. And what Peter discovered goes far beyond today's ring. Peter opened a folder thick with photographs and documents and laid it on the polished mahogany of my coffee table. Mrs. Grace, your daughter-in-law has been selling pieces from your collection for almost 2 years. Small things at first. Antique brooches, pearl earrings, a silver necklace. Things you might have thought lost or simply misplaced. My heart began to pound a frantic drum against my ribs. We've documented at least 12 different sales at pawn shops and antique stores across the city. The total comes to about $45,000. The world tilted. 45,000. Cynthia wasn't just humiliating me, she was systematically stripping away my past, piece by precious piece. But how did she know which pieces to take without me noticing? She's smart, Peter continued, his voice devoid of judgment, merely stating fact. She only took pieces you rarely wore, or those kept at the back of your drawers. Apparently, she'd been mentally cataloguing your jewellery for years, identifying what she could take without immediate detection. We also have evidence she's been photographing all your valuable belongings, likely assessing what else she could liquidate. Frank added, Peter has recordings of Cynthia at 3 different pawn shops where she clearly lies about where the jewellery came from. In one, she claims they were heirlooms from her deceased grandmother. In another, she says her husband gave them to her, feigning a medical emergency for quick cash. Fury and betrayal rose in a bitter metallic taste in my mouth. 2 years. While I'd felt guilt, questioning my own memory, Cynthia had been stealing from me, then spinning elaborate lies to sell my belongings. Her elaborate charade, her quiet, insidious pilfering, had been building toward a much larger scheme. There's more, Peter said, turning a crisp page in the file. Her spending patterns don't match the official income she and your son declare. In the last 2 years, Cynthia has bought over $30,000 worth of clothes, paid for expensive spa treatments, lavish vacations, and frequented high-end restaurants. When we match these expenses with the money from your jewelry sales, the numbers align perfectly. The designer handbags, the expensive shoes, the constant parade of red and green dresses she wore with an air of superiority designed to make me feel small. It had all been financed by my money, by the treasures she'd stolen from the useless old woman she so obviously despised. But wait, I interjected, a new wave of anger surfacing. If you've known all this for months, why didn't you tell me? Frank and Peter exchanged a glance. Grace, we needed enough evidence to build an irrefutable case, and we wanted to wait until she made a mistake, big enough that she couldn't deny it, couldn't manipulate her way out of it. Today's theft of the $3 million ring is exactly that mistake. Just then, my phone rang again. An unknown number. I answered. Mrs. Grace? A woman's voice, nervous, unfamiliar. This is Detective Miller from the Metro Police Department. We're at the Plaza Hotel with your daughter-in-law, Cynthia. She insists you gave her permission to take the ring, claiming it's all a misunderstanding. Could you please come down and clear this up? Detective Miller, I replied, my voice steady, cold. My daughter-in-law took that ring without my permission. I have her own text message admitting she borrowed it without asking. Furthermore, that ring is valued at $3 million and is part of a legally registered collection. I understand, Mom, but your daughter-in-law is very upset. And your son is also here, insisting there must be some mistake. He says you've never owned such valuable jewellery and that there's probably an error in the appraisal. A laugh escaped me, dry and humourless, a sound that startled even Frank and Peter. Detective, my son is implying I'm either too poor or too dumb to own something so valuable. An awkward silence stretched. Well, Mom, he did mention you live on a modest pension and haven't shown signs of that kind of wealth. Detective Miller, I said, a new resolve hardening my tone. I'll be there in an hour, and I'm bringing my lawyer and all the documents that prove not only that the ring is mine, but also that my daughter-in-law has been systematically stealing from me for years. I expect that when I arrive, she will be in police custody, as is appropriate for a thief who has stolen property valued at over $3 million. I hung up, then turned to Frank and Peter, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching my lips. Gentlemen, it's time for Cynthia and my son to learn exactly who they've been dealing with all these years. Frank's answering smile was grim. Grace, there's one more thing you should know before we go to the hotel. Peter discovered Cynthia has been talking to an art appraiser named Michael, showing him photographs of several pieces from your collection. Apparently, she was planning a much bigger heist. According to our recording, she believed she could sell several of your paintings and sculptures for at least $200,000. Peter added, his voice lowering, Mrs. Grace, your daughter-in-law doesn't just see you as a useless old woman. She sees you as a source of income she can exploit without consequences. In her own words, recorded during a phone call with that appraiser, she said, "The old woman doesn't even know what she has. I could steal half her stuff and she'd never notice. She's too senile to keep an inventory of her belongings." The words were a physical blow, a sharp, cold slap. Cynthia hadn't just been stealing, she'd been laughing at me, convinced I was too stupid, too senile to ever catch on. Her grand plan wasn't just to pilfer, but to stage a massive raid, leveraging what she perceived as my declining faculties. "Frank," I said, rising from my chair, a steely determination settling deep within me, a feeling I hadn't known for decades. "I want you to press every possible charge against Cynthia, not just for today's ring, but for all the thefts over the past 2 years. And I want my son, Liam, to know exactly what kind of woman he chose as a wife." "Are you absolutely sure, Grace?" Frank's question held a note of caution. "Once we make this public, the whole family will know the truth about Mark's fortune and about Cynthia's crimes. There will be no going back." My gaze drifted to the window, to the garden Mark and I had cultivated for 40 years, the garden Cynthia had longed to replace with a modern entertainment area. I thought of the countless humiliations, the feeling of invisibility in my own home, the silent tears shed in the dark, wondering if I truly was as useless as she made me feel. "Frank," I said, turning back, my eyes alight with a fierce resolve, "it's time for this senile old woman to teach them a lesson they will never forget." We arrived at the Plaza Hotel to a scene straight from a tabloid. 5 police cars, reporters gathered like vultures, and gala guests, whispering, pointing. This was the kind of high society scandal that would resonate for years. As I stepped into the lobby, my eyes instantly found Cynthia. She was on a leather sofa surrounded by 3 officers, but the elegant, controlled facade was shattered. Her perfect makeup was streaked with tears, her gold dress wrinkled, and her hands were cuffed in front of her. The ring, my $3 million ring, was conspicuously absent from her finger. Liam stood next to her, gesturing wildly at a detective. When he saw me enter with Frank and Peter, his desperation curdled into fury. He strode towards me, his eyes blazing, blaming me, not his thieving wife, for this unfolding disaster. "Mom, you have to fix this right now," he yelled, his voice echoing through the crowded lobby. "Cynthia is being publicly humiliated because of you," his voice accused. But I held my ground. "Her friends are posting videos. Her reputation is completely ruined." "Her reputation," I echoed, my own voice a low, steady current against the rising tide of his anger, though inside an inferno raged. "Liam, your wife stole a $3 million ring from me. We're not discussing a misunderstanding over some trinket. This is a felony." "But Mom," Liam began, a flicker of genuine shock in his eyes, "you never told us you had anything so valuable." "If we'd known, this never would have happened. Cynthia thought it was just a worthless old ring." At that, Frank, my attorney, stepped forward, a thick manila folder held out like a shield. "Mr. Davies," he stated, his tone crisp, "here are all the documents proving the ring's value, certificates of authenticity, insurance policies. Your wife didn't steal a worthless old ring. She stole a historic piece of jewelry valued at $3 million. Liam took the folder, his gaze, initially incredulous, slid across the pages. As he absorbed the figures, the history, the sheer weight of what he held, his expression melted from disbelief into utter stupefaction. This can't be real. Dad really had these things. Why did you never tell us? Because your father knew it was better to keep our wealth private, I explained, the words feeling heavy on my tongue. And seeing as how your wife has been stealing from me for 2 years, it seems he was right. A beat of silence. Stealing from you for 2 years? What are you talking about? Before Liam could fully process the question, Peter, my head of security, stepped in, presenting his own slimmer, yet equally damning file. He opened it, revealing a montage of shame, photographs of Cynthia at various pawnshops, audio recordings of her casual lies about the jewellery's origin, crisp sales receipts. Your wife, Mr. Davies, Peter's voice was devoid of emotion, has been systematically liquidating your mother's belongings for the past 2 years. We've documented thefts totaling $45,000. Liam stood frozen, the evidence spread before him. His world, once a stable edifice, visibly crumbled. The woman he'd married, the woman he'd allowed to treat me with such contempt for a decade, was a common thief, preying on his own mother. Just then, Detective Miller, a woman with sharp, observant eyes, approached our small cluster. Mrs. Davies, I need you to officially confirm a few details. Did you give your daughter-in-law permission to take this ring? Absolutely not, I stated, my voice firm as granite. I have the text message right here where she herself admits she borrowed it, without asking my permission. In my world, taking something without permission is called stealing. And can you confirm the ring legally belongs to you? She pursued. Frank seamlessly interjected. Detective, all legal documents are here. The ring was purchased by Mrs. Davies's late husband in 1975, is registered in his will, insured for its full value, and is part of the official inheritance inventory. The detective scanned the documents, a brief nod confirming their veracity. Everything seems to be in order, Mrs. Davies. Do you wish to press criminal charges against your daughter-in-law? Before I could reply, a desperate wail tore through the air. Grace, please! Cynthia's voice, raw and unvarnished, cut through the calm. It was just a misunderstanding. You know I would never intentionally hurt you. I've always treated you with respect. I turned slowly, deliberately. For the first time in a decade, Cynthia's eyes met mine, not with their usual veiled contempt, but with a naked, pleading desperation. For the first time, she needed me. Respect, I repeated, my steps measured as I walked towards her. You call 10 years of humiliation respect? Respect is telling me to eat in the kitchen when guests came over? Respect is stealing from me for 2 years and then calling me senile? Her eyes widened, a fresh wave of panic washing over her face. Stealing? I never stole anything from you. This is the first time I've taken anything of yours. Peter, a silent avenger, stepped forward, the pawnshop photos fanned out in his hand. Mrs. Davies, we have photographic and video evidence of you selling your mother-in-law's belongings on at least 12 different occasions over the past 2 years. Cynthia's face went utterly blank, then pale as ash. Her gaze darted from the photos to me, then to Liam, a frantic search for any lifeline. Those were just small pieces I thought she didn't use anymore, she mumbled, her voice barely a whisper. I never thought she would notice. I thought she had forgotten about them. And that gave you the right to steal them? I pressed, my voice unyielding. And to lie at the pawnshop claiming they were heirlooms from your grandmother? Liam's face, etched in horror, turned to her. Cynthia, did you really do that? Were you really stealing my mother's things for years? Tears streamed down her face, her carefully constructed facade crumbling completely. Liam, you know how much we needed the extra money. You know your salary wasn't enough for the lifestyle we wanted, and she has so many things. I thought she would never notice a few small pieces. But they weren't yours to take, Liam roared, the dam of his own denial finally breaking. They belonged to my mother. And you made me believe she was losing her memory when she asked about her things. It was then, in that chilling moment, that the deeper truth crystallized within me. Cynthia hadn't merely stolen. She had weaponized Liam's trust, systematically manipulating him into believing I was descending into senile dementia. Every lost trinket I mentioned, every misplaced memory I voiced, she'd whispered to him that it was normal for old people to lose things. "Detective Miller," I said, a strange, profound calm settling over me. "I want to press all possible charges against my daughter-in-law. Not just for today's ring, but for all the thefts she has committed over the past 2 years." "No!" Cynthia shrieked, scrambling to her feet as if to flee a phantom chain. "Please, Grace, I can give everything back. I can pay you back. Don't do this to me." I met her gaze, unwavering. "Cynthia, for 10 years, you treated me like I was invisible. You humiliated me in front of guests. You made me feel like a useless burden in my own home. For 2 years, you stole from me while making me believe I was losing my mind. And now that the consequences have arrived, you want me to have mercy. But I never thought it was so serious," she stammered, words catching in her throat. "I never thought you had such valuable things." "If you had known," I countered, letting the words hang in the air. "If you had known I had valuable things, what? You would have stolen more?" I let the question sink in, a silent, damning indictment. "Cynthia, the problem isn't that you didn't know the value of what you stole. The problem is that you stole from me. The problem is that for a decade, you treated me like dirt." Frank stepped forward again, addressing the detective. "Detective Miller, we also want to file charges for the other documented thefts. We have enough evidence to prosecute at least 12 additional cases." The detective nodded crisply. "Understood. Mrs. Davies, you are under arrest for first-degree grand larceny, multiple counts of petty theft, and fraud. You have the right to remain silent." As the Miranda rights were recited, I turned to Liam. He stood transfixed, watching his wife's official arrest, the full realization dawning that the woman he'd married was a criminal who had preyed on his own mother. "Mom," he whispered, his voice broken. I didn't know about any of this. You have to believe me." "Liam," I replied, my gaze softening slightly. "Maybe you didn't know about the thefts, but you did know how Cynthia treated me. You saw every humiliation, every slight, every moment she made me feel invisible in my own home, and you never said a thing." He lowered his head, unable to meet my eyes. He knew I was right. For 10 years he had been a silent witness as his wife transformed me into a stranger in my own house, choosing the easy path of silence, of non-confrontation, of failing to defend his own mother. Now the truth laid bare, he finally understood the crushing price of his complicity. "Mum," he mumbled, his voice thick with regret. "I thought you two would eventually find a way to get along. I thought if I stayed out of it, things would work themselves out." "Things don't just work themselves out, Liam," I said, a faint tremor in my voice, especially when one person is systematically abusing another. "Your wife didn't just disrespect me for a decade. She stole from me, manipulated me, and was planning to steal even more. And you thought that would just fix itself?" A glance around the room showed several guests from the charity gala, discreetly, or not so discreetly, recording the unfolding drama on their phones. The story of the millionaire mother-in-law who caught her thieving daughter-in-law would be viral by morning. For Cynthia, whose entire social identity was built on her image as an elegant, respectable wife, this public immolation was far worse than any jail cell. Detective Miller finished the arrest protocol, gently guiding Cynthia toward the exit. But before they reached the door, Cynthia wrenched free, turning to me with an expression I had never witnessed before, pure desperate fury. "Grace, you don't understand what you've just done," she shrieked, her voice raw. "My life is ruined, my friends, my reputation, everything is destroyed. And why? Because of a stupid ring you never even wore." "No," I replied calmly, meeting her furious gaze. For 10 years of theft, humiliation, and mistreatment. Today's ring was simply the straw that broke the camel's back. But I gave you a family, she continued, a desperate, baseless claim. I gave you grandchildren you never had. Liam and I gave you a purpose in your old age. That was the most absurd lie I had heard in years. Cynthia, I stated, my voice cutting through her hysterics, you didn't give me a family. You turned my family into strangers who treated me like a burden. And as for grandchildren, you two decided not to have children. Remember, you said kids would ruin your figure and interfere with your career. Liam visibly flinched with every word, sinking further into himself. I think he was finally seeing Cynthia, stripped bare, manipulative, selfish and utterly willing to lie and blame when the consequences of her actions finally caught her. "Grace!" Cynthia screamed as the detective gently urged her onward. "If you go through with this, you'll lose your son forever. Liam will never forgive you for destroying his marriage." I looked at Liam. He stood there, watching his wife hurl threats as she was arrested for stealing from his own mother. "Liam," I said, my voice barely audible. "Is that how you feel? Do you think I destroyed your marriage?" Liam was silent for a long moment, processing everything he had discovered in the last 2 hours. The weight of it all seemed to press down on him, rendering him utterly speechless. The woman Liam thought he'd won, the elegant, sophisticated Cynthia was, in fact, a thief, a viper who'd bled his elderly mother dry for years, twisting his perception, making him believe his mother's fading memory was the onset of senility. "No, Mom," he finally said, the words a raw wound. "My marriage dissolved the instant Cynthia first stole from you. I just couldn't see it until now." Cynthia, for once, was silenced, a stark, pale figure. She'd always counted on Liam to deflect, to blame his mother for every problem, as he always had. But the evidence now, stark and undeniable, had ripped her facade to shreds. After they led Cynthia away, the silence in the room felt heavier than the air. Then Peter handed Mrs. Grace an additional folder. "Mrs. Grace, there's something else you should know." His voice was low, grave. "During our investigation, we discovered Cynthia had been in contact with a lawyer specializing in wills and estates." Liam looked sicker by the second, his face ash. "What does that mean?" he choked out. Frank stepped in, his gaze fixed on Liam. "It means, Mr. Hayes, your wife wasn't just stealing from your mother in the present. She was planning for the future, researching how to seize the entire inheritance once your mother passed." Peter added, "We found emails between Cynthia and this lawyer discussing the possibility of having your mother declared mentally incompetent. The plan was to prove you had senile dementia, thereby lacking the legal capacity to manage your finances or property." A frigid dread snaked through Mrs. Grace's veins. Declared mentally incompetent, an ice-cold strategy. "Yes," Peter continued, unblinking. "In one email, Cynthia mentioned you had been frequently losing things, suggesting this could be used as evidence of mental decline. Of course," a beat of chilling silence, "we now know you weren't losing them. She was stealing them." Liam sank heavily into a lobby chair, the plush fabric offering no comfort. "Oh my God," he mumbled, his voice thick with disbelief. She was planning to steal everything from you." "Not only that," Frank interjected, the weight of his words pressing down. "We also found she had been pressuring Liam to convince you to move into a nursing home. Once institutionalized, it would have been much easier to obtain a court order declaring you mentally incompetent." The memories flooded Mrs. Grace, Cynthia's subtle suggestions, cloaked in concern that she was too old to live alone, needed professional care, would be happier among her peers. It hadn't been concern. It had been a calculated surgical strike on her life and fortune. "Mrs. Grace," Peter said, his voice now devoid of any professional detachment, "your daughter-in-law is far more dangerous than we initially believed. We're not talking about impulsive petty theft. We're discussing a meticulously crafted long-term plan to siphon your entire inheritance and legally justify it by stripping you of your mental faculties." Liam lifted his head, his eyes brimming with tears, shame etched on his face. "Mom, I never suspected any of this. When Cynthia mentioned the nursing home, I truly thought it was out of genuine concern for your well-being." Mrs. Grace sat beside him, taking his hand. "Liam, your wife manipulated you as much as she did me. She knew exactly which strings to pull, exactly what to say to make her intentions seem pure." Frank closed his folder with a decisive snap. His gaze, now on Mrs. Grace, was serious. "Grace, with this mountain of evidence, the district attorney will almost certainly offer Cynthia a plea deal. Depending on how we navigate this, she could face between 5 and 15 years in prison." "And what about the money she already stole?" Mrs. Grace asked, the question hanging in the air. "Most of the pieces she sold were acquired by private collectors," Peter explained. "We'll be able to track down and recover about 60% of the stolen value. The rest, sadly, was likely spent feeding her lavish lifestyle." Liam let out a deep, shuddering sigh. "Mom, what happens now? What's going to happen to me? To our family?" A good question indeed. Within the span of 2 hours, her entire family had been irrevocably cleaved. Her daughter-in-law, a criminal facing years behind bars. Her son finally awakening to the grotesque tableau of his life. And Mrs. Grace, the senile old woman who'd been an invisible fixture for a decade, now stood, unexpectedly, at the very center. "Liam," she said, her grip firm on his hand, "what happens now is you decide what kind of man you want to be. For 10 years you were a silent accomplice to your wife's abuse of me. Now you know the truth about who she really is. The question is, what will you do with that information?" "Mom, I want to fix things with you. I want to make up for all the years I didn't defend you." He looked desperate, lost. "Making it up to me isn't about money, Liam. It's about respect. It's about never again allowing someone to treat me like I'm invisible in my own home." Liam nodded, a flicker of something new in his eyes, understanding. Can I stay with you tonight? I don't want to be home alone after all this." For the first time in a decade, her son was asking her for something, not demanding subservience to his wife's whims. "Of course you can stay, Liam," she said, her voice softening. "But tomorrow, we need to have a serious talk about how we're going to rebuild our relationship." As they left the hotel, the glow of a news van pulsed in the street. A reporter, microphone in hand, spoke rapidly into the camera. "Millionaire grandmother catches thieving daughter-in-law with $3 million ring." By tomorrow, the whole city would know that Grace, the invisible old woman, had emerged. A woman with more power than anyone had ever imagined. The next morning, a new dawn broke within Mrs. Grace. For the first time in 10 years, she woke in her own house without that gnawing sense of being an intruder. Liam had slept in his old room, and when she descended, she found him in the kitchen, making coffee. A simple gesture, yet it was the first time in a decade someone had made something for her in her own kitchen rather than expecting her to serve. "Good morning, Mom," he said, and there was a subtle shift in his voice, something that touched her deeply, a quiet respect, a silent apology woven into every syllable. "Good morning, son." She sat at the old oak table where she and Mark had shared breakfast for 40 years, the very table where Cynthia had made her feel like an unwelcome guest for far too long. Liam placed a steaming cup before her, then settled on the opposite side. "Mom, I couldn't sleep last night," he confessed, his gaze distant. "I kept replaying all the times Cynthia treated you badly and I said nothing. All the times you said you couldn't find something, and I just dismissed it as your memory failing." "Liam," she gently interrupted, "you don't need to punish yourself for being manipulated. Cynthia is incredibly shrewd. She knew exactly how to frame things, to make her actions appear as concern for my well-being, all while she was robbing me blind. But I'm your son," he insisted, his voice raw. "I should have been on your side, I should have seen the signs. Mrs. Grace took a sip of coffee, then met his gaze directly. What matters now is what you do in the future. The question is, Liam, are you going to try to save your marriage with a woman who plotted to steal everything from me and have me declared mentally incompetent? Liam was silent for a long moment, the internal battle raging visible on his face. 10 years of marriage, of shared history, warring with the shocking betrayal. She was still his wife despite everything. Just then the phone rang sharp and insistent. It was Frank. Grace, I have important news. The district attorney wants to meet with you this morning. Apparently Cynthia's case is bigger than we initially thought. Bigger how? Mrs. Grace's heart began to thrum. When they searched her house last night, they found a secret room in the basement. Grace, your daughter-in-law wasn't just stealing from you. She's been running a sophisticated theft and resale operation of antiques, implicating several wealthy families across the city. Mrs. Grace's blood ran cold. What do you mean? They found over 50 pieces of art and jewellery that don't belong to her or Liam. It appears she's been using her access to high society social events to identify targets, then organising more elaborate thefts. Your house wasn't just a target. It was her base of operations. Liam went stark white. Are you saying our house has been the centre of a criminal operation for years? Frank's voice hardened. There's more. They found correspondence indicating Cynthia had been selling information to professional thieves' house blueprints, family schedules, security system details. The FBI is now involved because this operation crosses state lines. Mrs. Grace felt a dizzying surge of disbelief. The woman who had shared her table for a decade, slept under her roof, eaten her food, not only stealing from her but orchestrating a criminal enterprise from her own home. Frank, what does this mean for Liam? She asked, a tremor in her voice. Could he be considered an accomplice? The FBI will want to question him, of course, Frank conceded, but so far all evidence suggests Liam had no knowledge of his wife's criminal activities. She was very careful to compartmentalise and keep him away from her operation. After she hung up, Liam and Mrs. Grace sat in stunned silence. Her house, the sanctuary she and Mark had built with so much love, had been violated in ways she was just beginning to comprehend. Mom, Liam finally spoke, his voice thin. How is it possible that I was married to a criminal for 10 years and never realised it? Because she didn't want you to, Liam, Mrs. Grace replied, the words laced with a weary wisdom. People like Cynthia are masters of compartmentalising their lives. To you, she was the elegant wife on your arm. To me, she was the daughter-in-law who constantly humiliated me. To her victims, she was the thief planning robberies. She kept every aspect of her life completely separate. An hour later, Frank returned, this time accompanied by two figures who introduced themselves as FBI agents, Karen Silver and Michael Rodriguez. Agent Silver, sharp-eyed and formidable, spoke first. Mrs. Grace, we believe your daughter-in-law has been using your house as a base of operations for at least 3 years. We've identified connections to thefts in 6 different states. What makes this case particularly chilling, Agent Rodriguez began, his voice low, is that Cynthia didn't just randomly rob houses. She perfected a sophisticated method, cultivating social bonds with wealthy families, casing their homes during elegant events, then feeding that intimate knowledge to seasoned thieves. Liam's brow furrowed. But how did she keep all this hidden? Your wife is exceptionally intelligent, Mr. Davies, Agent Silver interjected, his gaze unwavering. She never touched the physical goods. Her role was pure intelligence, an information gatherer, a facilitator. She'd sweep through charity galas, exclusive dinners, art openings, memorizing the intimate details of other families' lives, their homes, their treasures. Agent Rodriguez slid a folder across the polished table. Inside, hundreds of photographs spilled out, clandestine shots of priceless paintings, antique sculptures, the glittering jewellery worn by unsuspecting women, even discrete images of security systems and floor plans. I recognized many of the grand houses, the faces of women I'd shared coffee with for years at endless charity functions. A cold dread seeped into my bones. Agent Silver, I managed. Does this mean other families? Were also her victims? At least 12 we've identified so far, Mrs. Davies. The total value we've linked to her operation surpasses $2 million. Liam looked utterly broken, his shoulders slumping. Agent Rodriguez, what happens to me? Will people think I was part of it? Mr. Davies, Rodriguez replied, his tone firm. We've meticulously reviewed your finances, your communications, your daily routines. There is zero evidence you had any knowledge or involvement in your wife's criminal endeavors. However, we do require your full cooperation. Agent Silver leaned forward, locking his eyes onto mine. Mrs. Davies, there's one more thing you need to understand. When we apprehended Cynthia last night, she immediately commenced negotiations. She's offering us her entire criminal network on a silver platter, in exchange for a reduced sentence. My breath hitched. What kind of information? Names, details of unsolved robberies, locations of hidden stolen goods. She's willing to betray everyone to avoid 20 years behind bars. Frank, my lawyer, visibly tensed. And what does that mean for Grace, then? How much time could Cynthia truly face if she cooperates? If her testimony helps us unravel all related cases and leads to the arrest of the network's other members, she could be looking at 5 to 8 years, instead of the 20 to 25 she's currently facing. Liam let out a long, shuddering sigh. So, even now, even after getting caught, Cynthia's still finding a way to twist the system to her advantage. That's the mark of a truly intelligent criminal, Agent Rodriguez observed, his voice devoid of emotion. They always have an escape plan. After the FBI agents left, the silence of my living room felt heavier than usual. My home, my sanctuary, had been the clandestine hub of a criminal enterprise. The woman who had made me feel utterly invisible had been using my 4 walls to plot against families exactly like mine. Mom. Liam's voice was small, far away, as he sank onto the couch beside me. How do we even begin to get through this? How am I supposed to rebuild my life after knowing I was married to a criminal for 10 years? I looked at my son, a man of 40 suddenly appearing like a lost boy. Liam, I said, my voice gaining unexpected strength, we will do the same thing. We will decide that Cynthia does not get to define us. She lied to you. She stole from me. She used our family for her own twisted ends. But now that we know the truth, the power is ours to decide what to do with it. And what do you want to do, Mom? He asked, a flicker of hope in his eyes. A smile touched my lips, a genuine one that felt unfamiliar after so long. Son, I'm going to show the world exactly who Grace really is. And I'm going to make sure no other family suffers what we did. The following days evaporated in a blur of activity. Frank, with his sharp legal mind, arranged a press conference. I would appear not just as a victim of Cynthia's scheme, but as the woman who had, in the end, unmasked the entire operation. For the first time in a decade, I would be the center of attention, for all the right reasons. The morning of the press conference, I awoke before dawn. I chose my emerald green dress, the one I had bought for Mark's anniversary, the one Cynthia had always dismissed with a sneer about my outdated tastes. I fastened the few pieces of jewellery Cynthia hadn't found a way to pilfer. As I looked in the mirror, I saw not a frail, forgotten woman, but the elegant, powerful Grace I had always been, buried beneath years of unkindness. Liam escorted me to the venue. Mom, he said, his hand gently on my elbow as we approached the grand entrance, I'm so incredibly proud of you. These past few days, they've been hell. But the way you've handled everything, Dad would be proud too. The room buzzed with the low hum of anticipation journalists, blinding camera flashes, curious onlookers who had come for the story of the elderly millionaire who caught her criminal daughter-in-law. When I stepped inside, every eye fixed on me. But this time there was no pity, no condescension, only respect, sharp curiosity, and a surprising flicker of admiration. Frank took the podium first, his voice resonating through the microphone. "Good morning. My name is Frank, and I represent Mrs. Grace Davies, 71 years old. She was not only the victim of a calculated criminal scheme orchestrated by her own daughter-in-law, but through her actions, she was instrumental in unmasking an extensive theft ring that terrorized this city for years." Then he gestured to me. As I approached the microphone, a strange calm settled over me. For 10 years I had been silenced, dismissed, my words treated as meaningless. Now dozens of people awaited my every syllable. "My name is Grace," I began, my voice clear and steady. "And for the last 10 years I was a victim of psychological abuse and systematic theft at the hands of my daughter-in-law, Cynthia. But what I want you to understand is that this isn't just my story. It is the story of far too many elderly people victimized by family members who see them as nothing more than easy targets." I continued, not as a pathetic victim, but as a woman who had endured, who had guarded her secrets until the opportune moment, and who had finally found her path to justice. "Cynthia believed I was a senile old woman, too blind to see her crimes," I stated, a trace of steel in my voice. "But what she didn't know was that my late husband taught me to be observant, patient, and strategic. When I first suspected something was wrong, I didn't confront her directly. I investigated. I gathered evidence. I waited for the perfect moment to act." A reporter's hand shot up. "Mrs. Davies, why did you wait so long? Why didn't you report the thefts earlier?" "Because I needed enough evidence to ensure Cynthia couldn't twist the narrative," I replied, meeting his gaze. "People like my daughter-in-law are masters at playing the victim. If I had acted too soon with insufficient proof, she would have convinced everyone that I was a confused old woman imagining things." Another journalist spoke. "How does it feel to know your own home was used as a base for a criminal network?" "I feel betrayed, of course," I admitted, "but I also feel powerful, because in the end, I was the one who stopped it. My report led to the arrests. My evidence unmasked the entire network." After the press conference, something extraordinary began. My phone became a lifeline, constantly ringing. Journalists from across the nation clamored for interviews. Documentary producers wanted to tell my story, but the calls that truly resonated were from other older women who had seen my interview and recognized fragments of their own pain. A woman named Diana called, her voice trembling. "Grace, I saw you on TV, and I think my son-in-law is stealing from me. My jewelry has been vanishing, but my daughter says it's normal for old people to misplace things. After hearing you, I realized, maybe I'm not losing my memory." Another Brenda told me her daughter-in-law was pressuring her to sign bewildering documents. "Your story made me realize I need my own lawyer, not the one my daughter-in-law recommends." These conversations illuminated a stark truth. My experience with Cynthia was far from unique. Thousands of elderly individuals were being exploited by family members who abused their trust, many lacking the resources or knowledge to defend themselves. That night, Liam and I had a long, somber conversation about our future. "Mum," he said, his voice resolute, "I've decided to divorce Cynthia. I can't stay married to someone who hurt you so deeply and who turned out to be a criminal." "Are you certain, son? It's a huge decision." "Completely. For 10 years, I chose Cynthia over you. It was the biggest mistake of my life. I won't make it again." 3 days later, an unexpected call arrived. It was Peter, a television producer who had seen my press conference. "Mrs. Davies," he began, "I have a proposal. Have you ever considered having your own show, where you help other elderly people who might be victims of familial exploitation?" The idea intrigued me. "What kind of show?" "A show where people can call in, tell their stories, and you offer advice, drawing from your incredible experience. We'd bring in legal and psychological experts too. We could call it the wisdom of grace or something similar. For the first time in my 71 years, someone was offering me a platform to transform my own suffering into a force for good. For decades, I had been the devoted wife, the self-sacrificing mother, the invisible mother-in-law. Now, finally, I had the chance to be something more. An advocate, an educator, a voice for those who had been silenced just like me. Peter, I said, a new kind of power surging through me. I'm interested, but I have some conditions. That night, as I prepared for sleep, in my own home, truly my own for the first time in years, I reflected on how profoundly my life had changed. The echoes of Cynthia were still there, but they no longer controlled me. I was Grace. And my story was just beginning. A week ago, I was just Grace, the invisible old woman nobody noticed. Now, the sharp whisper of my phone. A text from Frank announced a seismic shift. Grace, FBI just called. Thanks to your case and Cynthia's info, they've arrested 6 more members of that network. Your courage didn't just save you, it saved countless families. A slow smile bloomed in the dim light of my bedroom. Cynthia had spent a decade trying to erase me, to convince me age had rendered me null and void. Yet, in the end, it was my strength, my patience, my intelligence that dismantled her kingdom of deceit. The useless old woman had proven to be a force far grander than anyone had imagined. 2 weeks after the press conference, my life spun in an orbit I never foresaw. The Wisdom of Grace, my TV show, became a national phenomenon. Each day, hundreds of calls poured in, elderly voices finally brave enough to expose their own hidden family abuses and thefts. Frank, with an initial $2 million from my secret inheritance, had formally launched the Grace Foundation for the protection of the elderly. The irony was a bitter, beautiful pill. The very money Cynthia had plotted to steal was now a shield for others against predators like her. But the true satisfaction arrived with Peter's call. My private investigator's voice buzzed with barely contained excitement. Grace, Cynthia's testimony has been even more valuable than we expected. The FBI's rounded up the entire Network 15 people, including the master thieves, the crooked appraisers, even the art dealers who fenced the stolen goods. My breath hitched. And Cynthia? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. What about her? Peter paused, a theatrical flourish. Here's the interesting part. Despite her cooperation, the judge decided her crimes were too vast for a reduced sentence. 12 years in federal prison, and when she gets out, full restitution to every victim. 12 years. Cynthia, who had spent 10 years trying to make me disappear, would now vanish herself for over a decade. Yet the story wasn't quite finished. That same afternoon, an unexpected call rattled me. Grace, it's Cynthia. My heart hammered against my ribs. How are you calling from prison? A deep sigh. They allow one call. Grace, I need to talk to you. It's important. For a decade, I dodged direct confrontations with her. Now, with truth exposed and her power dissolved, I found a strange courage within me. Speak, Cynthia, I commanded. A long, agonizing silence hung in the air, then an unfamiliar sound, Cynthia crying. Not her usual theatrical performance, but a raw, desperate sob. Grace, I need you to know something. When I started taking your things, I truly believed they were worthless. But then, when I realized their value, I couldn't stop. It felt like an addiction. My jaw tightened. And that's supposed to excuse 10 years of humiliation and theft? No, she choked out, it doesn't. But I need you to understand. I never meant for it to escalate this far. At first, it was just a small brooch. Liam wanted a vacation. We needed money. No one noticed when I sold it. So I took something else, then another. May. I listened silently as her confession unspooled. Grace, the truth is, I was always so jealous of you. this beautiful house, Mark's respect, a life I desperately wanted. When I married into the family, I expected to be the queen, but you were the matriarch. I was just the son's wife. So you decided to make me your enemy, I finished for her. Yes, she whispered. That's exactly what I did. And the more I humiliated you, the more powerful I felt. As if by making you small, I became bigger. It was the first time in 10 years Cynthia had spoken to me with unvarnished honesty. Cynthia, I said, my voice heavy, do you know what hurts me most about all this? What? She murmured. That for 10 years I tried to connect with you. I tried to include you in family traditions, to teach you Mark's recipes, to share the memories of this house. And you took all of that and used it to hurt me. I know, she mumbled. I know. And that's what hurts me most now, Grace. In prison I've had time to think, and I realize I destroyed the only real family I ever had. My own parents abandoned me. Your family was the only one that gave me a chance. And you wasted it, I finished, a bitter echo. I destroyed it. And not just that, I destroyed Liam too. He called yesterday, said he's filing for divorce. He can't stay married to someone who hurt his mother so deeply. It was true. Liam had been transparent about his plans. I can't keep pretending this marriage can be saved after everything she did, he'd told me. Cynthia, I finally said, why are you telling me all this? What do you want me to do with this information? I don't want you to do anything, she said, her voice thin, raw. I just wanted you to know that I realize what I lost. Not just my freedom, not just my marriage. I lost the chance to have a real family, to have a mother-in-law who actually cared about me. I did care about you, Cynthia, I replied, the words thick with old grief. For years, I truly tried to understand why you hated me so much. I didn't hate you, she confessed, a faint sob. I envied you, and that envy, that turned me into a monster. I hung up, a strange cocktail of emotions swirling within me. 10 years I'd waited to hear Cynthia speak the truth, but victory felt hollow. Only sadness remained for the lost time, the shattered potential of a united family. That night, Liam came for dinner, a new ritual since Cynthia's arrest. As we ate, I recounted the call. Do you think Cynthia was being sincere? He asked, his gaze searching. I think she's finally facing the reality of her actions, I replied. But Liam, what matters now isn't whether Cynthia finally understands what she did. What matters is what we learn. He frowned. What do you mean? I mean that for 10 years our family allowed a toxic person to control us. I will never again let someone make me feel invisible in my own home. And I hope you never again let someone mistreat the people you love. Liam nodded, a solemn resolve hardening his features. Mum, he said, I've learned the hardest lesson of my life. I will never again choose superficial peace over defending what is right. The next day brought even better news. The Grace Foundation received an anonymous $5 million donation. Frank explained the source. Grace, the Martinez family saw your show last week. Mrs. Martinez realized her granddaughter was exhibiting the exact same patterns as Cynthia, pressuring her, suggesting a nursing home, borrowing small pieces of jewelry. Thanks to your story, she hired a private investigator and discovered her granddaughter was planning a similar scheme. They stopped her just in time. The granddaughter was arrested, and Mrs. Martinez recovered everything stolen. She said your show saved not only her fortune but probably her life. It was incredible my pain, transformed into a shield for others. Cynthia had tried to strip me of my worth, my dignity. Instead, she had inadvertently forged a purpose greater than I could have ever imagined. That night, preparing for bed, I reflected on the extraordinary journey. A month ago, I was an unseen old woman, feeling useless. Now I was a national advocate for the elderly with a successful TV show and a foundation changing lives. Cynthia had intended to destroy me, but instead she'd awakened a strength I hadn't known I possessed. The sweetest revenge wasn't her prison sentence, It was discovering who I truly was the moment I finally found the courage to stand up for myself. A year after Cynthia's arrest, my life had blossomed in unimaginable ways. The Wisdom of Grace had become the most watched show in its slot, broadcast in 32 countries. The foundation had helped over 1,000 families. But the profoundest change wasn't public, it was intensely personal. This morning, as I watered the flowers Mark and I had planted 40 years ago, an unexpected visit unfolded. Liam arrived, a striking woman in her 40s at his side, her brown hair framing a genuine smile that instantly reminded me of Mark's. "Mum," Liam said, a touch of nerves in his voice. "I want you to meet someone very special. This is Natalie, and, well, we've been dating for the last 6 months." Natalie stepped forward, her demeanour respectful yet confident. "Mrs. Grace, I've heard so much about you. Liam has told me your entire story, and I must say you're an inspiration to women of all ages." The first thing I noticed was the genuine respect in her eyes, a stark contrast to Cynthia's condescension. When Natalie spoke, her gaze met mine directly, not Liam's, as if I were truly seen. "Natalie," I ventured, a mischievous glint in my eye, "what do you think about my son dating you while he's still technically married?" Liam paled, but Natalie merely smiled. "Mrs. Grace, I appreciate your directness. Liam told me the entire situation with Cynthia before we started dating. The divorce papers were finalised last week. I would never have entered a relationship with a married man, no matter the circumstances. I liked her honesty. A lot. What do you think about having a famous mother-in-law who appears on TV talking about family problems?" I genuinely laughed, the sound surprising even myself. "Honestly, I'm proud. You took a terrible experience and turned it into something that's helping thousands. That requires extraordinary strength." Over the next few months, Liam and Natalie's relationship unfolded before me, a striking contrast to his tumultuous marriage with Cynthia. Natalie subtly nudged Liam to include me, to seek my opinion, to truly value my presence. When they hosted dinners, I wasn't merely tolerated. I was seated as the matriarch, honoured, not a burden to be endured. The profound difference simmered beneath the surface, then materialised. Natalie genuinely wanted to know me. She'd lean in, asking about my life with Mark, the lore of our old house, the quiet traditions of our family. She wasn't seeking to erase our past, but to weave herself into its rich tapestry, a thread of continuity. One afternoon, sunlight spilling through the kitchen window as we chopped vegetables for dinner, Natalie paused, her knife still. "Mrs. Grace," she began, her voice softer than usual, "what can I do to make sure I never become someone like Cynthia?" I stopped, my breath catching. The question hung in the air, heavy with a vulnerability I hadn't expected. I considered it carefully before speaking. "Natalie, Cynthia became what she became because she saw our family as something to exploit, not to contribute to. You're already different just by caring enough to ask." Her gaze was steady, searching. "But I want to be specific. What behaviours should I avoid?" "Never try to isolate Liam from his family," I told her, my voice firm. "Never speak ill of me when I'm not present. Never assume that because I'm older, my opinions don't matter. And if you ever have a problem with me, talk to me directly. Don't try to manipulate Liam into being your intermediary." Natalie nodded slowly, absorbing each word. "And is there anything I can do proactively to be a good daughter-in-law?" "Recognise that this house, this family, has a history that existed long before you arrived. Respect that history while you help create new stories. And never forget that being part of a family means giving as much as you receive." 6 months later, Liam called, his voice laced with a nervous excitement. He asked me to join him to choose an engagement ring for Natalie. The irony wasn't lost on me. Everything had begun with Cynthia stealing a multi-million-dollar ring, scarring our family. Now I was helping my son select a symbol of genuine love. "Mom," he said, turning a diamond under the brilliant jewellery store lights, Do you think I'm making the right decision? Do you think Natalie and I can build something lasting after everything with Cynthia? I placed a hand on his arm, meeting his anxious gaze. Liam, the difference between Natalie and Cynthia is fundamental. Natalie sees our family as something valuable she wants to protect. Cynthia saw us as something to exploit. That difference, son, means everything. The proposal was perfect. Liam orchestrated a dinner in our dining room, the very room where for years Cynthia had made me feel like an intruder. But this time, I sat at the head of the table, rightfully restored as the family matriarch. When Liam dropped to one knee and Natalie's joyous yes filled the air, her first instinct was to walk straight to me. She hugged me tight, tears glistening in her eyes. "Mrs. Grace," she whispered, "I hope I can be the daughter-in-law you deserve." I held her close. "Natalie," I replied, "you already are." The wedding day was the happiest family celebration we'd shared in over a decade. Natalie had insisted the ceremony be in our backyard garden, a quiet homage to the legacy Mark and I had so lovingly built. During the reception, Liam asked me to say a few words. 2 years ago, I began, my voice clear over the murmur of guests. I believed my family's story had crashed to a close, humiliated and betrayed. But today I understand that terrible experience was merely the end of a chapter, not the end of the book. Natalie, welcome to a family that now knows how to truly value mutual respect, honesty, and genuine love. Later, as guests danced under the twinkle lights, my phone buzzed with an unexpected text. It was from a woman named Karen, a viewer who had followed my show from the beginning. "Grace," the message read, "your story gave me the courage to report my son, who was stealing my medication. Thanks to your example, I got my dignity and my health back. Now my son is in rehab, and our relationship is healing. Your courage inspired me to find my own." These messages had become a regular current in my life, a global chorus of voices, people who, after hearing my story, had found the strength to stand up for themselves. It was proof that the pain I had suffered had transmuted into something powerfully positive. That night, after the last guest had departed, I sat alone in the quiet garden, reflecting on the extraordinary journey. 2 years ago, I was an invisible old woman, victimized by a daughter-in-law who saw me as an inconvenience. Now I was a national advocate, a woman with a new daughter-in-law who genuinely respected me, and the matriarch of a family rebuilt on honesty and love. My phone rang one last time. It was Frank. "Grace," he said, his voice flat, "I have final news on Cynthia. They just rejected her appeal. She's going to serve the full 12 years. And how do I feel about that? I asked myself, the words echoing in the silent garden. Only you can answer that question. The truth was, the anger was gone. I felt a quiet sorrow for her. She'd had the chance to be part of a real family, and she'd squandered it on greed and envy. Now she would spend 12 years in a cold prison while I savoured the vibrant new life I had forged with courage and determination. "Frank," I said, a lightness in my voice, "Cynthia is no longer part of my story. My story is about the thousands of families we've helped, about the new relationship with Liam, about the wonderful daughter-in-law I have, and about the legacy I am building." After I hung up, I looked up at the vast expanse of stars and whispered, "Mark, I hope you're proud." The invisible old woman who had almost lost everything had finally found her voice, her power, her purpose. The sweetest revenge wasn't destroying Cynthia. The sweetest revenge was rebuilding myself. And now tell me, have you ever experienced an injustice like this? Have you had to find your own strength to defend yourself against someone who underestimated you? I'd love to hear your story in the comments.